Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So I wish you a very good afternoon on this sunny September day, which also happens to be my birthday, as probably most people. I'll take the applause to be for my mum. I didn't do anything apart from just appear. You know, she did all the work. So the title for this afternoon's talk is, of course it's happening inside your head, Harry, but why on earth should that mean that it's not real? So for some of you that will seem like a very esoteric title for a Dhamma talk. Others of you who have read the Harry Potter books or watched the films will go, that sounds familiar. And for those of you who are not familiar with these stories, one of the reasons I chose this title for today's talk was because it was my birthday and I decided to indulge myself in two of my favorite subjects, which is Harry Potter's stories and also the area of the Buddha's phenomenological approach to Dhamma and to the world of experience and our practice of Dhamma and liberation. So to clue people in on where this comes in the story is there's a spoiler alert here in case you haven't got familiar with them already or you intend to, is right at the end of this many years of conflict between Harry Potter, the young wizard, and the arch figure of darkness and danger called Lord Voldemort. They've had a duel and Harry has been zapped and is dead on the forest floor. And so it seems like Lord Voldemort has slain him, which he has, he's dead. But Harry then appears in this Bardo realm, shaped in the form of King's Cross Station, for reasons known to the author, but also it has a role in the story. And in this Bardo state, this kind of interstitial state, which looks like King's Cross Station, then Harry meets his former mentor, Albus Dumbledore, who used to be the headmaster of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, who had died in a previous book. And so Harry's surprised to meet Dumbledore there because he's supposed to be dead. And then Harry, having realized that he got zapped by Lord Voldemort, he realizes, well, I'm dead too. So so in their exchange and the dialogue between Harry and his late mentor, then in that state, realizing that he has died and his body's lying on the forest floor, but he sees around him, he's having this conversation with a very living Albus Dumbledore, and it feels very tangible. And so at a certain point in the dialogue, he says, is this all just happening in my head, or is this real? Is this real, or is this just happening inside my head? So he's trying to figure out what's going on, where he is, and what the situation is. And then that the title of the talk today is Dumbledore's response to him. Of course, it's happening inside your head, Harry, but why on earth should that mean that it's not real? So I feel this, when I read that in the book, when the book first came out and I read it a number of years ago, I thought, that's a very, very smart way of expressing a very important principle. And it relates to a theme that was very, very common in Luang Por Sumedho's teachings, which is that and those of you who've been his students for many years or listened to his talks and read his books will know that he would frequently make this observation that the world is in your mind. We think of ourselves as me moving around in the world and the world is outside us, but over and over again Luang Por would say, actually, the world is in your mind. And this is not something that's difficult to recognize or to acknowledge, because right at this moment, everything that every single one of us knows about this present reality is through seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, thinking, imagining, memory, language. It all gets put together and says, Sunday afternoon talk at Amaravati on September the 2nd, 2018. And Ajahn Amaro is just warming up to his subject. So that is all put together by what we hear, what we see, what we remember, what we think, our understanding of language, and those are all mental events, aren't they? Seeing, I close my eyes, you vanish. I can hear a few of you. If I close my ears, unblock my ears, open my eyes, then you all appear again. So that over and over again, Lumpur Sumedho would emphasize this. The world is in the mind. And we think that we are going places and doing things, but all along, the center of the world is your heart. The heart of the universe, the heart of the world is your heart. You're always, each one of us is always at the very center of the world, right? Everywhere, each one of you, whether you're Sri Lankan or English or Thai or American or French or German or Italian or Norwegian or Swedish or any variety, any mixture of the many nationalities here at Amaravati and amongst our visitors, every single one of us throughout our entire lives, wherever we were, it was always here, right? Whether you were a small child, whether you're an adult, whatever continent your body happened to be parked on, wherever you were, there was a feeling of here-ness, right? Life is experienced here, right? So this doesn't take psychic powers to tell that. That's how it is for all of us. So wherever we were seeing Sri Lanka, or we were seeing Latvia, or we were seeing Italy, or seeing Kent, or seeing California, or seeing Oslo. But it was seeing arising in consciousness, hearing arising in consciousness, feeling, smelling, tasting, touching. So the world has always only ever happened in our minds. Everything that we've ever known about the world has been known through the agency of this mind. The first time I really got to contemplate that in a serious way was in 1983, so that's 35 years ago now. And I was just about to set off on what we hoped was going to be a long walk all the way through England, myself and Nick Scott, a layman, setting off from Chithurst Monastery to walk on a windy route all the way through England up to the newly opened branch monastery in Northumberland. And so I've been preparing for this. Another of the monks had been a shoemaker before he was ordained, so we made a pair of sandals for me together, and then I was going out on training walks and figuring out what gear I was going to take and contacting the various people that had made invitations. And so there'd been a lot of preparing, and also I'd only been a monk for about 4 years, and I was in my mid-20s, so there's a lot of restless, youthful energy in the mix. And so there's definitely a feeling of me going somewhere. There's a plan. I'm going on this long walk through England, and on the morning that we were aiming to leave, which was early May of 1983, and Lumpur Sumedho gave a morning reflection, which, as many people would know, he would do pretty much every day. He would give a morning reflection to the whole community, and it was everyone knew that we were going to be setting off that day. And one of the comments that he made really stuck with me, because what he said was, in actual fact, there's nobody going anywhere. There are just conditions changing. And so when you're in the middle, kind of setting off on your stride to walk 800 miles on a wiggly route all the way through England with this great adventure, then that was a wonderful reflection. There's nobody going anywhere, because even as the body is walking along, it's always here, right? Even if you're running, you're always here. Even if you're moving at speed, you're on a high-speed train, you're going at 125 miles an hour, or you're on an aeroplane going at 600 or 700 miles an hour. It always is felt here, now. Life happens here and now. And so that what that does is that puts that quality of movement and change into a context. And it counteracts that habit of me going somewhere, me, this individual being passing through time, going from here to there, going from this event to that event. It puts that in a different context. In the suttas, there's a similar exchange, or addresses a similar area. That's a well-known dialogue between the Buddha and a deva called Rohitassa. So this is in the Samyutta Nikaya, the Connected Discourses. And Rohitassa had been a yogi with some great psychic powers and in his previous lifetime. And on this particular occasion, this deva appears to the Buddha and speaks to him and says, in my last lifetime, I was a yogi and I had considerable psychic powers. I was able to walk through the sky. So he was the original Skywalker. Not Luke Skywalker, but Rohitassa Skywalker. And so I could walk through the sky, and I was, and I made this resolution that I would walk until I reached the end of the world. But even though I committed myself to this vow, and I walked and I walked and I walked, even though I didn't stop to do anything apart from occasionally to rest or eat or answer the calls of nature, even though I walked for my whole life, I died on the journey and I never reached the end of the world. So please, Venerable Sir, can you offer your reflections on this? So the Buddha said to Rohitassa, to this deva, he said, you cannot reach the end of the world by walking, but I tell you that unless you reach the end of the world, you won't reach the end of suffering. So that's a conundrum, that's a kind of puzzle. And so then he makes this very interesting and powerful comment. He said, it is in this fathom-long body, this 6-foot-long body, with its perceptions and its thoughts, there is the world, the origin of the world, the cessation of the world, and the way leading to the cessation of the world. So you'll recognize that that's, say, a copy of the expression of the Four Noble Truths, but the word world is being put in place of the word dukkha, or suffering, unsatisfactoriness. And so that the Buddha is saying, unless you reach the end of the world, you won't reach the end of suffering. And so he aligns those two together. Now, those of us who are of a life-affirming habit think, but I love the world. I don't want to look forward to the end of the world. The world is wonderful. Are you promoting annihilation of the planet, or are you just wishing for the whole solar system to get swallowed up in a black hole? Why do you want the world to end? So then one of the themes of this talk then will be to address what does the Buddha mean when he talks about the world, loka, and why should the end of the world be something that is attractive or beautiful. But also the Buddha was very skilled at speaking in ways that could shock and would get your attention, because whereas Rohitassa thought that that getting to the end of the world was something that was achievable on the material plane, the Buddha is saying no, that your understanding of what the world is and how that works, it's all completely mistaken. You're not seeing it in a correct way, in an accurate way. And it's also interesting in the footnotes to this passage in the Samyutta Nikaya, Bhikkhu Bodhi has done the English translation, and he's quite a discerning scholar. He's very skilled at Pali and English. He did a degree in Western philosophy at Columbia University before he became a Buddhist monk and trained in Buddhist philosophy. And he makes the comment in his footnotes that this statement of the Buddha, that within this fathom-long body with its perceptions and thoughts, there is the world, the origin of the world, the cessation of the world, and the way leading to the cessation of the world. Bhikkhu Bodhi makes the comment, this is perhaps the most profound statement, the most profound proposition in all of human thought. And he's not one who sort of speaks in kind of extravagant or over-the-top ways. He's very careful with the comments he makes. So that's quite a statement for Bhikkhu Bodhi to make. This is perhaps the most profound utterance, profound proposition in the field of human thinking. And the meaning of it, or the value of it, hinges around what we think of as the world. Now, our ordinary everyday understanding is the world equals this planet Earth. This is the world. And that's how we generally use the word in English. And in the Buddha's time, similarly, they would talk about loka as the great Earth, the planet that everyone was standing, sitting, walking, lying down on, and experiencing. But then, in a parallel discourse, one that's closely connected to this dialogue with Rohitassa, he spells it out. He says, the world, we say the world. What do we mean when we say the world? And then he says, that whereby one is a perceiver of the world, a conceiver of the world, that is called the world in this Dhamma and discipline. So I'll say that again, not to get too esoteric. So that whereby one is a perceiver of the world and a conceiver of the world, that is what we call the world in this Dhamma and discipline. And what is it whereby one is a perceiver and a conceiver of the world? The eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, the body, the mind. That is the means whereby one is a perceiver of the world and a conceiver of the world. And the Pali words for that, a conceiver of the world is lokamani, a perceiver of the world is lokasanyi. So what he's saying is the world is the world of our experience. That's the only world that we can meaningfully talk about is seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. We can't meaningfully talk about a world that is beyond our experience. We can only talk about the world that we know. This is the world that each of us has perceived and has lived in, that comprises our life, our perception of our body, our personality, our life story, who we think we are, the name we call ourselves, our function in the world. This is all built up of these perceptions. So the only world we know is our mind's version of the world. Does that make sense? So the only world that we can meaningfully talk about is our mind's version of the world. Now, in ordinary everyday life, we talk about the world, and we assume that our version of the world is reality, and other people's versions of the world, if they're different, they are perhaps good people, but they're deluded. That's often the case. And again, I'll aim to address that a bit more directly later on. But when we consider things in this way, that the world is in the mind, and that the world that we know is fabricated from what we see, hear, smell, taste, and touch, what we think, what we remember, our language, our imagination, then that makes the world a bit more fragile, doesn't it? And so that this is what we, in Western philosophy is called a phenomenological approach. Again, I don't want to get too technical, but because I feel this is a really important area of Dhamma teaching, and I've been particularly reflecting on this over the last year or two, and I feel this is something that makes a huge amount of difference in our lives and the way that we relate. So in Western philosophy, this is called phenomenology. So the people like Edmund Husserl, who was a German philosopher, was a developer of this field of phenomenology, and then his most famous student was Martin Heidegger, and so on. And again, the basic principle is that the only world you can meaningfully talk about is the world of your own experience. That's the phenomena that is known. That's all that we can meaningfully talk about. And it's kind of interesting, if you look up on the great oracle of Wikipedia, Buddhism and Western philosophy, there's an account of Husserl saying that when he was reading the German translations of the suttas, he, quote unquote, couldn't put it down. That he was so closely in, the Buddha's teaching was so closely in alignment with how he saw things being, that it was a huge confirmation for him, and something that was really illuminating. So if we take, but Husserl and those he was in the late 19th century, early 20th century, but there were obviously philosophers thinking about all these kind of things way back into the Greek times. And so this idea that all that we experience is just a in our minds, like Harry asking Dumbledore, is this really happening? Is this all just in my head, or is this real? That question has been asked in the West, at least since Greek times, and so sometimes people have come to the conclusion that, well, it's all in your mind, and that the only real thing in the world is your own mind. And so, just to take a little bit of a digression into Western philosophy on this, so that what's called solipsism is this belief or the view that our mind is the only real thing, and other people don't really exist. Other things don't really exist. Nothing is real apart from our own experience, and that so that the mind is basically witnessing a huge illusion or a huge dream. And so that this can get us into kind of very deep water, and we can get quite lost in it, and it can become very confusing. So I'll try to avoid creating more confusion, because, of course, this is all about ending suffering rather than increasing it. But I feel it's useful to understand what other people have said and thought about this area. So, if it is all in my head, if things don't really exist apart from what I'm seeing, then what's going on? What's real? What's happening? So one of the philosophers that was sort of active talking about this area was Bishop Berkeley, pronounced Berkeley in America. So the Berkeley in California is named after him. So Bishop Berkeley, and so he and one of his propositions was that no item can be said to truly exist unless it is observed. So that you say that the shrine behind me doesn't exist because I'm not observing it. You might be observing it, so it exists for you, but I can't say that it exists because I can't see it. So this was his philosophy, that things don't exist unless you're observing them. So of course, this having been proposed, and him being a university person, some undergraduate wag came up with a couple of limericks that related to this, because in his explanations, Bishop Berkeley used the image of the oak tree standing in the quadrangle of his college as an example. That if the oak tree doesn't exist, if he's not watching it, then if he turns away, he can't. He can't say whether the oak tree exists or not when he's not observing it. So I was pondering this theme today, and I remembered these couple of limericks that somebody, I don't know who, but some student wrote many years ago, describing Berkeley's philosophy. And they go, there was a young man who said God must think it exceedingly odd to find that this tree continues to be when there's no one about in the quad. And then the response to that is, dear sir, your astonishment's odd. I am always about in the quad. And that's why this tree will continue to be, signed, yours faithfully, God. I don't know why my mind remembers these things, but it does. Yeah. I didn't even have to look that one up. So once we get into this area about, well, if it's all in my head, if all I know is my own experience, like, well, what's real? What can be trusted? What's meaningful? And so we can kind of make ourselves crazy in this respect. And so this has, if you take the idea that particularly that that you're the only real thing and everybody else doesn't really exist, other things don't really exist, then you can get yourself into really deep water. And those of you who've ever read any Kurt Vonnegut books, there's a book of his called Breakfast of Champions, where a character called Dwayne Hoover, he reads a science fiction book, and the book is written in the form of the author of the book is telling the reader, you are the only existent being in the world. Everyone else is a zombie or a robot. They don't really exist. You are, and this book has been written especially for you. This is your instruction. So he's reading a novel. It's a pretend book. But this character, Dwayne Hoover, is crazy enough to think, oh, it's talking to me. I am the only real person in the world, and everyone else is just a robot or a zombie. They don't really exist. They don't really count. And then he starts to act on that premise, and all kinds of chaos follow from that. So if we really take that principle in the wrong way, that my mind is the only real thing or is the only important thing, and nothing else really matters, then we steer ourselves towards being a sociopath or towards psychosis. So I definitely do not encourage that. But rather, using this reflection on everything is what we experience is our mind's version of reality. If it's seen in the correct context, if it's seen in a skillful way, then rather than being something that makes us crazy or sort of disconnected or disrespectful or disregarding of the needs and feelings of others, rather it has the opposite effect. If this principle of recognizing that what we experience is our mind's version of reality, rather than that kind of inflation of assuming that therefore we're the only important thing and nobody else really counts, rather it puts everything into a context, because what it does is it helps us to see that, well, when I look at when I open my eyes and look forward, and I see my finger, I say my finger is pointing to the left. And the people who are on the other side of my hand, when they look at this finger, they say, oh, it's pointing to the right. Well, my truth says left, their truth says right, and yet we're both correct. So my version of reality can seemingly be completely different from somebody else's version of reality, but we can still be in harmony with each other. So that when we recognize that our mind's version of the world is what we're experiencing, then if that's held in a context of Dhamma, then we recognize, well, of course, everybody else's version of reality is going to be slightly different. And why should my version be the version? Why should my version of the world be the defining version? What makes my version of reality more true, more real, more accurate than your version? Aha. So then that leads to a quality of respectfulness, a quality of humility, and a capacity to live harmoniously with others, because we're not taking our opinion, our experience, our feelings or our perceptions, our conditioning as being what defines the truth, the reality. So then to take a slightly different approach to this, in Luang Por Chah's teachings, he was very fond of using little puzzles or questions, conundrums that he would put to people. Again, exactly like the Buddha, he would put things in a way that would be quite startling, like the Buddha saying to Rohitassa, you can't get to the end of the world by walking, but unless you get to the end of the world, you won't get to the end of suffering. So Rohitassa's left like, what? Huh? How does that work? And then in the Buddha's approach, and what Buddha's saying to Rohitassa and Ajahn Chah would also be aiming at, is as long as you're making the world something where you are this independent being existing in time, and the world is this thing out there, and there's me going from one place to another, you're creating self, you're creating time, and you're creating location. And then that is dukkha. As long as the mind is seeing things in terms of self-view, is seeing things in terms of time, it's deeply attached to birth and death, to the conditioned realm. Therefore, that's why the Buddha said that he equates the loka, the world, with dukkha, with suffering, because as long as the mind makes the world solid, real, and makes time real, makes identity real, makes location something real, that is not necessarily out of tune with Dhamma. That makes sense? So that if we take self-view, I am Ajahn Amaro, I am 62 years old today. That's an absolute fact. If I take that to be absolutely true, that's attaching to self-view. So that necessarily brings dukkha with it, because my sisters still have to think twice before they call me Ajahn Amaro. Well, actually, they never call me Ajahn anything. Yeah, because my dear sisters, to them, I am their little brother. And so they will write on the cards, happy birthday, Amaro. But within themselves, I'm still their little brother. So that the degree to which the mind creates the world as solid is the degree to which it creates suffering. And the degree to which the mind can see that the world is empty is sunya, that it is void of intrinsic substance, that time is based on our perceptions. Location is based on perceptions. The feeling of identity, these are based on perceptions and conditioning. They are not the whole story. The degree to which the mind can see that the world is void of substance, it is empty, it's sunya, it has no intrinsic essence, that's the degree to which the heart will know non-suffering, will not be creating disharmony or dukkha. So the little conundrums Ajahn Chah would ask, he would say, if you can't go forward and you can't go back and you can't stand still, where do you go? And I often repeat this and use this in Dhamma talks because I feel it's incredibly nifty and skillful. And then you say, well, can you go sideways? No, you can't go sideways, and you can't dig a hole, and you can't climb a tree. So you can't go forwards, you can't go back, you can't go sideways, you can't go up, you can't go down. Where do you go? Where can you go? And he would sort of pin you with this kind of question, knowing that it's a mind game, it's a puzzle. If you can't go forward, you can't go back, you can't stand still, you can't go either side, where do you go? And so if you reflect on that, the only way that the puzzle, the conundrum can be solved is if the mind lets go of identification with place, with time, and with identity, with those qualities. So if you think of yourself as this independent being that is this body, that is passing through time, that is in this place, in Hertfordshire, Amaravati, Margaret's Lane, then if we take that as an absolute reality, then necessarily we're creating dukkha. And so the only way you can solve that conundrum is to let go of self, to let go of time, and to let go of location. To awaken to that aspect of mind which is unborn, unconditioned, uncreated, unformed. And that then is the solution to the puzzle. So as in the Udana, this collection of the Buddha's inspired utterances, then he makes the same kind of statement. And I suspect, I don't know, I never heard Ajahn Chah speak about it directly. Maybe Joseph, who was around a lot longer than I was, might have heard him actually quote a sutta on it. But in this particular passage in the Udana, the Buddha said, there is that ayatana, that sphere of being, where there is no sun, no moon, no stars, no coming, no going, no standing still. There is neither a dying nor a generation. There is, and this ayatana, this sphere of being, is without foundation, without basis, and without support. And this, I tell you, is the end of suffering, the end of dukkha. And so that within that, you have this phrase, there's no coming, no going, no standing still. So my suspicion is that Luang Por Chah came across that and thought, yes, or the Isan equivalent, that's it. So that as long as we think in terms of self-view, and we think in terms of time and identity and place, there's no solution to that puzzle. When the heart awakens to that dimension of its own reality, which is unborn, undying, which is timeless, which is selfless, which is unlocated, then the solution to the puzzle is clear. Does that make sense? So that it's speaking about a level of insight that is quite profound. So it's not even me having an insight or you having an insight. But rather, it's the mind awakening to that dimension of its own nature, which is and always has been unborn, undying, which is timeless. The very name of this monastery, Amaravati. So you're not just in Amaravati geographically. This is talking about Amaravati with a really big A. That deathless reality, the unborn reality that is the foundation of this very heart, this very mind of ours. So another conundrum that Ajahn Chah would like to use in the last couple of years of his teaching period, he used this image of what he called still flowing water. So again, when people would come to visit, he would, just by way of making conversation or just sort of opening up a Dhamma theme, he'd say, "Have you ever seen still water?" Yeah, nam ning kei hen mai. Is that sort of close enough? Joseph used to be my abbot at Wat Pananachat many years ago. So he's my Thai language consultant. We've got a few others as well on this side too. So, did you ever see still water? And people said, "Well, yes, of course." And they said, "Did you ever see flowing water?" And they said, "Well, yeah. I've seen the river and the streams. Yes, of course, I've seen flowing water." Then he'd say, "Did you ever see still flowing water?" Nam lai ning, nam lai ning. And they go, "Huh?" And I was there a few times when he would ask this question, and you see this puzzled look, kind of like, is that some kind of local expression, or that's something kind of special thing they got here in Ubon, or they wouldn't know what he meant. They say, "Nam lai ning, yeah, kei hen mai." Did you ever see still flowing water? And they said, "Wow, yeah, I don't think I ever did. What is that?" And after he'd let the person sort of squirm for a bit and come up with a few tries about what it might mean, he would then say that the mind is like still flowing water. This is describing the nature of mind, because it flows. There is the constant flow of perceptions and thoughts and feelings that continually arise and come into being. Our memories, our ideas, our emotions, what we see, hear, smell, taste, and touch, that continually arises and flows. But yet there is that quality of stillness. The mind can know that quality of change and flow, and that that quality of knowing is perfectly present. It's not going anywhere. It has that quality of perfect stillness. It's not bound up with place or time. It's perfectly still. So the mind is like still flowing water. There's the quality of stillness and there's the quality of flowing, and they work together. They're mutually supportive. They don't interfere with each other. The flowing doesn't interfere with the stillness doesn't interfere with the flow. So, and again, this represents the same quality, because as we learn to recognize the world as the world of our own experience, then rather than taking refuge in the world of our experience being a particular way, like having I want to hear these sounds and not those sounds, I want to have these flavors and not those flavors, I want to see these colors and shapes and not those colors and shapes, that in terms of the context of Dhamma, we don't make even the arrangement of our version of the world something that we take refuge in, or something that we place an excessive value upon, but rather what we take as the refuge or the foundation of our life, of our perspective, is that quality of awareness, that awakened awareness, that quality of knowing, the puru in the Thai language, the one who knows, that knowing, awakened awareness of the heart. That is the reliable quality that we can draw upon. And so insight meditation, vipassana meditation, is all about the clarifying of that quality, the establishing of that in the heart, and the learning to train the heart to be that very knowing, to embody that quality of awakened awareness as the flow of liking, disliking, happiness, unhappiness, comfort, discomfort, praise, criticism, gain, loss, etc., etc. As they flow through the sphere of awareness, and so that in a sense the heart is taking refuge in that quality of knowing, which is an ever-present, timeless quality. When that is occurring, then there, even in the midst of activity, like Luang Por Sumedho saying, there's actually, in actual fact, there's nobody going anywhere. There are just conditions changing. What he's pointing to is that if you take refuge in that quality of awareness, even as your feet are carrying you through the English countryside all the way up to Northumberland, nobody's going anywhere. There's movement, but there's perfect rest, there's stillness. There's a lot of people, but there is no thing there. The mind is not creating a solid world out there or a solid I who's the experiencer of it. There's that quality of ease and stillness and spaciousness, even as the whole 10,000 things arise and pass through that sphere of awareness, that sphere of experience. So another image that Ajahn Chah used to describe this, not so much of a puzzle or a question that he would put, but he used the image of oil and water together. He used to say that we often think of the mind and its objects being one thing, like I feel happy, I feel unhappy, I'm uncomfortable, I'm comfortable, I'm going to Bangkok, or I'm going to London, I'm going to Amaravati. We in a very matter-of-fact way, we talk about who we are and what we're doing, how we feel. I'm unhappy, I'm happy, I'm comfortable, I'm uncomfortable. The ordinary everyday way we speak about these things is automatic for pretty much all of us, I would guess. Is that correct? This is our ordinary everyday speech. But he would say that we speak in that way and we think in that way, we understand in that way because of ignorance, because of not seeing clearly, avijja, not seeing clearly. And he said, in essence, that quality of awareness is not tied to our emotions, it's not tied to our perceptions, what we see, hear, smell, taste, or touch, but because of the habits of attachment and the agitation of our lives, the busyness of self-view, me doing something, me being this person, me going somewhere, me who has this story to sustain and these people to contact and engage with. We create these habits of self-view get empowered through that agitation. We mix up that quality of knowing with the flow of perceptions and feelings. He said it's like having oil and water together in a bottle. If you keep shaking the bottle, then the oil and the water seem like one liquid. It seems like I'm going, I'm coming, I'm feeling happy, I'm feeling unhappy, I'm comfortable, I'm uncomfortable, I'm sick, I'm healthy. That seems automatic. He said if you put the bottle down, then the oil and the water separate on their own. You don't have to tell the oil and the water to separate. They do it by themselves because they are immiscible. Their natures are different. So it's exactly the same with the mind. If you just put it down, put the bottle of your life down, you stop agitating it, then the awareness and the objects of awareness naturally separate out from each other. That if we just let it, you don't have to do anything special, just stop creating the causes for self-view, the causes for attachment and agitation and grasping. If we simply stop creating the causes for ignorance and feeding self-view, feeding the I and me and mine habits, and we just literally sort of set it down, then the oil and the water separate out, the awareness and the objects of awareness separate out. So like right now, in this moment, here we are sitting in Amaravati, in the sala, and there's a Sunday afternoon talk. It's a sunny day. It's now 2:46. So the time has been passing by. So we can say, I'm hearing this Dhamma talk, I'm interested in it, I'm not interested in it, this is really great, or this is really boring, or what's Ajahn Amaro going to say next? I might be thinking the same thing. So, but in this moment, we can be absorbed in that. I don't like, I'm comfortable, I'm uncomfortable, I'm too hot, I'm not, I'm too full, or I need a drink of water. So in this moment, if we just put the bottle down, then we can reflect. Oh, there's seeing. Close your eyes, not seeing. Seeing, not seeing. There's seeing, there's hearing the sound of this voice, making these words. Some of them I understand, some of them I don't understand. I have to write that down. Solipsism, that was pretty weird. Phenomenology, that's really long. Somebody's phone going off, we can notice, well, that's hearing. Hearing arises and passes away. There's feeling of the embarrassment that your phone's just gone off. The feeling of the feeling of gratitude that I'm glad that wasn't me. Phew! I better check my phone too. Yeah. That's a feeling. That's an emotion. The feeling of relief that it wasn't you. Feeling of embarrassment that it was you. Then the laughter of making Ajahn Amaro making a joke that was reasonably funny. So then you laugh. That's just another emotion of amusement that arises, passes away. So in this moment, there's the thinking, feeling, hearing, seeing, smelling, tasting, touching, arising, passing away. So in this very moment, even as I'm speaking, that we can recognize, this is just patterns of consciousness arising and taking shape within the field of awareness. And that which knows the patterns of this moment, that which knows the person, knows the body, knows these emotions, that which knows the body is not a body. That which knows the emotions isn't an emotion. That which knows thought isn't a thought. That which knows the person is not a person. So again, this is a fairly challenging proposition, but we take ourselves to be, I'm a person, I'm a woman, I'm a man, I'm a monk, I'm a layperson, I'm a nun, I'm old, I'm young, I'm tall, I'm short. All these I ams that we habitually create, but in that moment of putting the bottle down and just looking, knowing, awakening the mind to the present experience, in this moment there's the awareness of feeling, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, arising, passing away. And that in that moment, then the awareness is one thing and the objects of awareness are another. So the process of vipassana meditation and the development of reflective wisdom, that's the essence of vipassana, is essentially putting the bottle down and letting those qualities separate out from each other, so that the awareness becomes unentangled with its objects and becomes free from that. So another of the passages that we have that's very significant and that Lumpur Sumedho was very, very fond of, and we now include in our chanting on account of Lumpur Sumedho's initiative, is another passage from the Udana, which is very close to that other quotation. And this is the Ati Bhikkhave Ajatang Abhutang Akatang Asankatang. Bhikkhus, there is the unborn, the unoriginated, the uncreated, the unformed. If there was not the unborn, the unoriginated, the uncreated, the unformed, then no hope of liberation from the born, the originated, the created, and the formed would be possible. But because there is the unborn, the unoriginated, the uncreated, the unformed, therefore liberation from the born, the originated, the created, the formed is possible. So that quality of awakened awareness, that is the heart, the mind that is liberated from the formed, the created, the originated. That is what is liberated, is that the heart which is awake, which is aware. So that's a possibility for us. But again, one of the going back to the kind of Dwayne Hoover and his psychotic misinterpretation of, I'm the only real being in the universe and everyone else is a zombie or a robot and doesn't really count. We might feel that, well, if I just take refuge in this awareness, does that mean I just sort of get dissociated from everything that I feel? Is that trying to just sort of disconnect from the living world, the perceptual world, all the other people? Am I just supposed to see my family as sankharas arising and passing away? That's, when it's your son's birthday, and then it's waiting for a present, and then you just say, well, all sankharas arise and pass away. You arose, so you'll pass away one day, so big deal, Though we're not trying to. So sometimes people feel like that in terms of that, or misinterpreting the teachings about emptiness. If you say the world is intrinsically empty, seeing the world as empty, the Buddha encourages that as what frees the heart from the bonds of birth and death. That's the way that we escape the Lord of Death, as the Buddha said to Mogaraja, is to see the world as empty. So it can seem like that, and people can easily misinterpret that as, so am I just trying to abstract this awareness and just sort of be this awake, aware quality, and everything else just sort of doesn't really count, and I just sort of dismiss the conditioned world or switch off, or just trying to make this aware mind just dissociated or disconnected. And so, again, if you do that in your meditation, you can do it, but you end up causing yourself and others around you a lot of headaches, a lot of difficulty, because I would say it is a kind of letting go, but it's a deluded letting go. And if we really follow the path of the Buddha and really apply the teachings integrated in a full way with the Dhamma, then along with that disentanglement, it's a strange way, but that it works. But in that disentangling, the letting go of self-view and conceit in relationship to the world, then there is its partner is a profound attunement to the world. So I like to use this term unentangled participating. So that as the mind disentangles, as you put the bottle down, and then the oil and the water separate out, then they still are in the same bottle. They're still connected together. So that as the heart disentangles itself from its identification with time and self and location, people and things, there is at the same time there's an attunement, and it's hard to describe how it works, but. Say in the qualities of the Buddha, we have a very fine example. The Buddha was fully enlightened; he was totally liberated and had let go of the world completely. So he was his heart had completely transcended the realm of birth and death. Yet, for the next 45 years, he walked barefoot around Bihar and Uttar Pradesh, living on alms food, and serving the needs of the people, and creating the Sangha, creating the fourfold assembly, bringing the Dhamma teachings into the world with amazing diligence and skill and imagination and patience and resolution. So that complete liberation from the world, its partner was an incredible kindness and generosity, a compassion. So as we say in the chanting, the Buddha absolutely pure with ocean-like compassion. So that absolute purity of wisdom, of seeing that all sankharas are completely empty, and that that all dhammas are not self. Yes, but in the same gesture, then that using this life and its capacity to think and to speak and to do and to act as a vehicle for benefiting other living beings and helping other living beings to awaken to that same reality, so that quality of wisdom and non-attachment, that sense of profound letting go, seeing the empty nature of the world, it doesn't create a kind of dissociation or a numbing in relationship to the living world and the sense world, but in a mysterious way it creates a much more acute attunement. So like the example I often give is like a conductor of an orchestra. The conductor is not playing any instrument, but the conductor has to be attending to the whole group, and is listening to everything that's going on in the orchestra, and is making adjustments as the orchestra is playing. So this wisdom faculty is both sort of transcendent. It's not playing an instrument, but it's also attuned and is guiding and nurturing the progress of the whole orchestra. I don't know if that's a particularly good analogy, but I feel it works in some ways. And again, just maybe the last thing to say is, one of the qualities that the Buddha has, one of the epithets of the Buddha is Vijja Charana Sampanno, and that's translated as impeccable in conduct and understanding, or perfect in knowledge and conduct. And so Vijja is that quality of awakened awareness. But its partner is charana, which is action. So if you have vijja without charana, you've only got the oil and haven't got the water. If you've got the charana, you've got conduct without the vijja, then you've got the water without the oil. So that if we have really used the Buddhist path and developed this quality of seeing the world in this different ways, seeing that the world happens in our mind, then that doesn't mean that there's a numbing or a switching off or a not caring about the world, but rather because we because we love the world completely, then we let it go. Because we've let the world go, then we can care about it completely. But that caring doesn't bring any quality of stress or burden. So even though the Buddha was introducing his teaching into a society that was not particularly geared for his voice, say, going against the caste system, going against the standard models of liberation and the understanding of spiritual development and the understanding of asceticism and so on, he had a big task on his hands. But there's no place in the suttas where there's any kind of hint that the Buddha was stressed or burdened by the enormity of the task he took on. He just set forth and say offered the teachings and made no struggle out of it within himself. He just did the work that was necessary, and his heart was at peace even as that work was being carried out, even as his enormous range of imagination and creativity and initiative that he took was being acted on, that it was not stressful or burdensome. So I feel this is a very wonderful example for us in our lives, whether you happen to be a school teacher or you're running a business, or you're a doctor, or you're a monastic, you're running Amaravati Monastery. This is a good example for all of us, that when we recognize that the world is happening in our minds, then we keep everything in that context of Dhamma, that there is the world, but there's also that which knows the world, the lokavidu, that which is aware of the world, that which transcends the world. And so then when that transcendent quality of awareness is embodied, then the heart can function and relate to the living world in a harmonious and skillful way. And as I was saying, one of the results of recognizing what I experience is my mind's version of the world, then there's a natural respect for somebody else's perspective to be completely different. That how could your version of the world be the same as mine? Of course, how could that be? And so there's a humility, there's a respectfulness, and therefore we're able to harmonize much more easily. So I offer these thoughts for your consideration today.
And you mentioned about the water and oil separation. If your mind don't do anything or resting, could you give some real-life examples that you can apply to? Do you mean, like, for example, somebody who's got a very confused mind, and if they just do more meditation, the mind will become clearer? That kind of examples?
Well, I think you've described most of it. So one of the aspects of mindfulness, and one of the say attributes of developing this quality of awareness, is that we can be aware of a confused mind. You can be it's like you can be aware of your thoughts sort of rattling around in your head, and there can be that awareness of, oh, it's really busy today. Just like when everyone's chatting, we can hear the sound of everybody talking, and then we can reflect, oh, it's really noisy. But that which knows the noise isn't noisy. So that which knows the confusion is not confused. So just like you can be out at nighttime in the dark, and you can recognize, I can't see, the way forward isn't clear, I can't see. You can know that you don't know. Does that make sense? So that if when the mind is in a state of confusion, if then we create the idea, oh, I shouldn't be confused, I've got to get rid of this confusion, otherwise I won't be happy, then you're creating suffering. But there are times when the mind is confused, or it's upset, or there's a strong emotion, and that quality of awareness is something that can be established in relationship to that emotion. So in the Buddha's teaching on the 4 foundations of mindfulness, the Satipatthana, are you familiar with that? No. So one of the Buddha's main teachings on meditation in the Pali teachings is called the 4 foundations of mindfulness, the Satipatthana. So it's divided into 3 sections: mindfulness of the body, mindfulness of feelings, and then the third one is mindfulness of mental activity. And so in that, it's not a very long description, but it's very significant because, and it's a lot of, say, the founder of this monastery, Ajahn Sumedho, he would really emphasize that aspect of the practice, because in that section of the Satipatthana it says, knowing the expanded mind is expanded, knowing the contracted mind is contracted. Knowing the agitated mind is agitated, the mind free of agitation is free of agitation. Knowing the mind that is the angry mind is angry, the mind free of anger is free of anger. So in that moment, the mind that knows, oh, this is an angry feeling, or this is an agitated feeling, or this is a confused feeling, this is a contracted feeling, there's no value judgment in that. It was one of the interesting things about that particular teaching is in that instance he doesn't say expanded is better than contracted, or unagitated is better than agitated. It's just, this is agitation, it feels like this. This is being free of agitation, it feels like this. This is the feeling of expansion, or this is a feeling of contraction. And so in terms of confusion, like say you're in a business meeting, and there's a lot of opinions rattling around the table, and then you're sitting there and you can think, I don't know what the heck's going on here. So you can be attuned, you can be listening to what's going on, but you can receive that confusion of voices and ideas and just know this is really confusing. And so that at that moment it might not be clear exactly what's being said or what the agendas are of the people around you, but you can know, oh, this is confusing. I can't read what's going on here, and that's what's happening now. So in that moment, there's still in the object world, there's confusion, but the heart which is knowing it is not confused. So that's a really useful skill to develop, because as we get older and our thinking abilities erode, some of us are over 60, so it goes generally in one direction, but even if it's not just our thinking abilities, in terms of emotions, emotional activity, then we can be faced with waves of confusion, or I can't remember this, or I don't know what that person's thinking. Are they upset with me? Worried about a situation? And so the mind that knows, oh, this is, I don't know what that person is thinking, and this is a worried feeling, I'm not sure what he thinks of me, and that quality of mindfulness can be brought to that uncertainty, that you can be, oh, okay, I'm not sure what that person feels, and this is a worried feeling that's arising in me. So in that moment, the worried feeling is an object, and that quality of awareness is, oh, this is that worried feeling when I want to know what someone's thinking about me and I don't know yet. That's what this is. I do this kind of practice a lot, and just naming what the feeling is. Like, sometimes say we do a lot of chanting here, and so sometimes if you're doing the chanting and the words of the chant might be very, very, very familiar to you, and then suddenly you realize, oh, I said the wrong word there. I got the wrong word. That wasn't the right line of the chanting, and I'm supposed to be leading. So oh dear, this is embarrassing. I just said the wrong word in the chanting. So then, at that moment, this morning, this very day, yeah. So maybe I was distracted by it being my birthday. I don't know. But we were chanting the Dhamma Sutta, and then as we were chanting, I got one of the words wrong. I thought, oh, that's interesting, and then I got that wrong, and then, oh dear, that's embarrassing. And then in that moment, then I reflect, as we're chanting, oh, this is the, oh dear, I'm supposed to be leading, and I don't like to make mistakes feeling. That's what this is. And so then at that moment, then it says, oh, this is the, if I'm leading, I don't like to make mistakes feeling. That's what this is. And the mind can let go of it and not make a problem out of it. So one of the the aspects of mindfulness that is talked about a lot in Buddhist tradition is sati sampajanya. Are you familiar with that term? So sati sampajanya, and it's usually translated as mindfulness and clear comprehension, or mindfulness and full awareness. So, and most commonly, mindfulness and clear comprehension. Sati is mindfulness, sampajanya is clear comprehension. So many years ago, Lumpur Sumedho, he's a very, very wise and kind of imaginative and reflective teacher, and he doesn't like to just go by the book. And he realized, clear comprehension is not quite right, because that gives the impression that you understand everything. He said, but that's not really sampajanya. It's not comprehending everything. Because that gives you the impression that you're actually you got a clear conceptual map of what's going on, but that's not sampajanya. So he started using the phrase intuitive awareness, because in English the word intuitive is much more fuzzy. It's to do with a feeling of orderliness, and there's an intuition. Like, I've got an intuition that I'm making sense with this response, but I'm not absolutely sure. So he started using the term intuitive awareness for sati sampajanya, because he says you can be fully mindful of something that you don't comprehend at all. You can be fully aware that you don't have a clue what's going on, but you're fully aware of it. It's like if it's dark and you can't see. Here we have a lot of lights around Amaravati at night time, so it's never completely dark unless you're out in the field. Even then, you got the lights from Watford and Hemel in the air. But say if you're in the forest, and your torch goes out, and it's completely black, and you can't tell which way is forward. You can't tell where the path is. You can't see your hand in front of your face. You can know that it's completely dark, and you don't know which way the path is. You can be fully aware that you don't know. And you can, in that full awareness, you can also not create suffering out of it. That, I can't even tell where the path, if the path is in front of me or behind me or beside me, I can't see at all. So that skill of being able to not take refuge in understanding, but taking refuge in awareness, is really useful. Because as we get older, or when we get ill, or our faculties erode, or we have different say states of mind, like if you have an illness and you're delirious and you're taking some, you've got a fever or something, and your mind is all over the place, you can sit there having hallucinations and go, that's interesting. And it's you're hearing voices or seeing weird images that kind of are not there, but you don't have to create suffering out of it. That's just the mind is creating this voice or this music or these images because of this illness or this sort of feverish state. So the more we can develop that, then our refuge is in the heart, in that quality of awareness, not in making sense of having everything in an orderly fashion that you can understand and label. Does that make sense? Any other questions, please? I'm not good at short answers. Yes, there's a hand at the back there. Venerable Jayadhamma's got a long walk. Fellow right by the clock there. Oh.
It's not very clear to me when you said the heart is atemporal. The heart is atemporal.
Is what?
Or timeless.
Uh-huh.
So, and then later you said also the mind can be timeless. So I don't really understand how I have to get this. That, does it relate to what you've just said, that awareness comes from the heart while understanding comes from the mind? So it's more subject to other things.
Well, thank you for the question. I use the words heart and mind a little bit interchangeably, but not completely. So often the mind, the word mind is used to refer more to the thinking faculty, but it can be used to refer to the whole quality of the mental field, including awareness as well. The heart, when I use the word the heart, then usually using that as a translation for the Pali word chitta, which generally is referring more to the quality of awareness itself. The quality of timelessness in Pali is akaliko, timeless. There's also another term, the pachupanna Dhamma, which means the here and now reality, or the here and now Dhamma. And so that's pointing to the immanent experience of time. Like I say, as everything, wherever you've been, it's always been here. Every moment of your life has always been now. And so that we create time, as in today is Sunday, it's the 2nd of September, this is 2018, by these measurements and numbers and names. But our felt experience of time is built around the awareness of the present. And there are various factors play into that, whether that is a pleasant or an unpleasant experience, depending on the attitude and what's being perceived. But every single one of us, all of our lives, it's always been here and it's always been now. So that in a way, that timeless quality is pointing to that nowness. So you can substitute akaliko, timeless, or pachupanna, the kind of here and now experience. So that the attention, as in one of T.S. Eliot's poems, again Luang Por Sumedho liked to quote very often, which is from the Dry Salvages in the Four Quartets. Men's curiosity searches past and future and clings to that dimension. But to apprehend the point of intersection of the timeless with time is an occupation for the saint. No occupation either, but something given and taken in a lifetime's death in love, ardor, selflessness, and self-surrender. He was very good with his words. So the short version is the habit of our thinking is to cling to time. It's now 3:38. We've got 22 minutes left of our Q&A, and then it's all over. Yeah. And so that the measurement of time, past and future, the habit is to cling to that dimension, but to apprehend the point of intersection of the timeless with time, that's the occupation for the saint or the meditator, really. And so that the more that the mind can awaken to that present timeless quality, then the more it's able to awaken to that quality of ease. That it's the breaking free of that, what you can call the tyranny of time. There's another phrase that comes in the teachings, which is bhava nirodho nibbānang, which means nibbana is the cessation of becoming. Bhava nirodho nibbānang. So when the heart frees itself from that becoming, like me passing through time, me getting somewhere, I was here and I'm going there, that the freeing of the heart from that being, attached to and identified with that self and time, then the experience is nibbana. As long as the mind is attached to self-view and conceit, and attached to time, then there's going to be dukkha, not nibbana. So peace comes through the letting go of time. So in terms of, it's also interesting in that respect, the way that we use the English word patience, because one of the paramitas, the spiritual qualities, last week I was talking about the 10 paramitas. So one of the 10 spiritual qualities that is developed by the Buddha, and that was, say, the emphasis of the forest monastic training, is patience, khanti, Khanti, khanti. So that is, so that's translated into English usually as patient endurance. So that immediately comes across as a kind of serious gritting of the teeth, not just patience, but patient endurance. That you're really good at gritting your teeth, grinding your jaw, but patience in terms of as a spiritual quality, as a paramita, patience is not just being tough and waiting for the time, being able to endure the time passing, but the khanti paramita, which is that transcendent quality, it's letting go of time. So the paramita of khanti is not waiting. You're not waiting for it to be over. As long as there's a me who's waiting for this to finish, it's not the paramita of khanti. It's not real patience. There's a toughness there, but it's letting the heart open to that timeless quality. That there is a letting go of that dimension. So another of Ajahn Chah's very wonderful little sayings is, he said, a samana, a spiritual seeker, has no future. So to our worldly way of thinking, like, no future, that's kind of, wasn't that a punk rock song? Wasn't that the Sex Pistols, no future? That sounds pretty nihilistic. But again, like the end of the world, it might seem nihilistic, but seeing the emptiness of the world, or seeing no future, to our worldly habits of thinking, it's a disaster, or it's nihilistic, or is really off-putting. But if it's seen from the perspective of Dhamma, it's like, well, of course, of course, no future. It's always now. So, any other questions? Yes, there's one gentleman here.
Ajahn, Amaro, first of all, thank you for such a wonderful talk about our mind. I've just wondered whether you could possibly link what I've read somewhere, in the seeing, there's only the seeing, in the hearing, there's only the seeing. I believe it's Bahia Sutta.
Mm-hmm. He's referring to the Bahia Sutta, which is also in the Udana, that same collection of the Buddha's utterances, and it's very closely related. That I think I told the story either last week or the week before, at least recently. So Bahia was a wanderer. Again, it involves a deva. So Bahia was a spiritual teacher of a different group. And one night, this deva, who had been a relative of Bahia's in the human world, appeared to him and said, "You think you're an arahant, but you're not. In fact, you're not even on the path to arahantship." So Bahia, rather than being sort of like, "Who do you think you are?" had enough spiritual humility to say, "Oh, well, that's interesting that you should say that. Well, are there any arahants in the world, or is this all say something that's out of my reach, or is there someone who can teach me? Because if you're correct and I'm not an arahant, and then I've been deluded, but I really would like to find what the true path is." And then this deva said, "Well, actually, a few hundred leagues from here, in the city of Savatthi, then there's this is the residence of the Buddha in the Jetavana near Savatthi." And the Buddha Gautama, he is indeed an arahant, and if you make your way to see him, then he can teach you. So then Bahia sets off, and he lived near the west coast of India, I believe, and then set off on foot for many days, and journeyed to Savatthi. And then when he arrived, it was the early morning, and he met the Buddha on his arms round, walking through the streets of Savatthi. And so Bahia kind of stopped him in the street and knelt down and said, "Please, Venerable Sir, you're a great enlightened one. Please teach me the Dhamma." And the Buddha said, "Bahia, we're on our arms round at the moment. This isn't a convenient time. Then please come and visit the Jetavana afterwards." And Bahia said, "Venerable Sir, life is uncertain, and neither you nor I know when we're going to die. And so that please teach me the Dhamma here and now." So then this went back and forth 3 times, as everything often happens in Buddhist stories, 3 times over. And if the Buddha is pressed 3 times with a question, then he has to answer. That's the way that it works. And so after the 3rd time, then he gave Bahia this brief instruction, and he said, "In the seen, there is only the seen. In the heard, there is only the heard. In the sensed, there is only the sensed. In the cognized, there is only the cognized. Thus, Bahia, you should train yourself. If you can see that in the seen there is only the seen, in the heard there is only the heard, so forth, then you will recognize that indeed there is no thing here. There's no subject. There's no hearer or seer. And if there is recognized there's no thing here, you will also recognize that there is no thing there. That not only is the subject empty, but the object world is empty. And when you recognize there is no thing here and no thing there, then you'll not be able to find yourself either in the world of this or in the world of that or any place between the two. This Bahia is the end of suffering." And Bahia became an arahant, just right there on the spot. So he got the prize for the one who understood the teaching quickest. The Buddha, there was various of his disciples, lay and monastic, got not exactly medals, but they got known as the ones who were most excellent at, like, say, Sister Kema was the most accomplished Dhamma teacher. Upalavana was the nun with the greatest psychic powers. Sariputta was the monk with the greatest wisdom, and so on. So Bahia got the prize for the one who understood the teaching quickest. But since he was a bark-clad ascetic, he wore tree bark, robes made out of tree bark, and he didn't have an alms bowl. He just collected food in his hands. The Buddha said, "Well, if you want to be my disciple, you need to find a robe and a bowl, and then I can give you the bhikkhu precepts." So then, while Bahia went off to find a robe and a bowl, then he got knocked down by a runaway cow and died on the street. So he was right. So that teaching is pointing to the immediacy of experience: seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, thinking, and when that experience is known in its true nature, in its simplicity and directness, then there is no agent, no subject, no solid I who is the experiencer, or a solid world that is the experienced. There's no thing in the world of this or in the world of that. There's no substance, no essence in the world of subject or object. So it's emptying out both the subject and object, and then that quality of experience, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, thinking, feeling, is known directly as these are patterns of experience, of the experiential field arising and passing away, and there's no fundamental substance or essence in any of that. And in seeing that subjectless, establishing that subjectless, objectless awareness, then that is the genuine freeing of the heart. And so also Bahia, he was fairly spiritually mature. It was one of those sort of just add hot water and serve. He was very, very much primed. It wasn't just anybody who was asking that question. So he was spiritually very mature, and he just needed that last instruction to clarify his view and to say complete the path. But that was enough, just that short instruction. And so that if we can establish that same kind of subjectless, objectless awareness, so there's knowing, but there's no me who's knowing, but rather it's the Dhamma is knowing its own nature, if you like, because the mind is the mind is not a person, or the heart, you can say, responding to our other friend's question. that awareness is not a person. It knows all those personal qualities, the feeling of being a woman, being a man, being old, being young, having a name and a story. Those personal qualities arise within that awareness. They're known by that awareness, but that awareness doesn't have any, it's not female or male or old or young, or it doesn't have a nationality or a shape or a size or an age. It's a timeless quality. So in that, and that every aspect of that awareness, it's a part of the natural order. It's not a person. It's not an individual. So that you can say it's an aspect of Dhamma. So in that moment, there's Dhamma aware of its own nature. So there's no person who gets enlightened, but the heart awakens to its own nature. So in a way, it's incorrect to say that such and such a person is an arahat. Rather, that there is arahata, there is arahatship or arahatness. And then the person is recognized by that awake mind, that the personal qualities arise and pass away, but that there's no, from the inside, there's no person who's an arahant. So if anyone tells you I'm an arahant, it's likely to be a mistake, in my humble opinion, my not very humble opinion, because that's those personal qualities, the I-ness and me-ness and my-ness, those arise, so that the aware mind is knowing. It's just like I was reading a Dhamma talk of Lumpur Sumedho's a couple of days ago, called "The End of Suffering Is Now," and in that he said, the mind isn't a person. The mind knows personal qualities. So, and if people are talking or they ask me, then I say, I'm Ajahn Sumedho. I was born in Seattle. I'm an American. I'm a man. I'm a Theravadan monk. But he said, but actually the mind itself, it's not Theravadan, it's not male, it doesn't come from Seattle. It's just the mind. It doesn't have any personal qualities. The personal qualities are known by that. But the mind itself is not a person. The mind is Dhamma. It's not a person. It's not an individual, not an I. And so we can hear those words, and the heart can go, oh yeah, right. And in the hearing of it, it can make perfect sense. But then as soon as the words finish, then, it's nearly 4 o'clock, I've got to go, The person comes back in, and I've got all these things to do, And that the karma of our own individual lives, having a name, having a gender, having an age, having a family, having a story, then they all kind of reactivate. But the degree to which the mind can know these are just convenient fictions, that it's not really, as Lumpur Sumedho would say, there isn't really a Sumedho, there's just Sumedhoing. And then also, if you look at the dialogues with Lumpur Cha when he was visiting England, there's some recordings and some transcripts of his dialogues with the Sangha when Chithurst had newly opened, and he's saying that he turns to Ajahn Sumedho and says, "There isn't really a Sumedho, is there?" Sumedho. He's turning to him and saying, "There isn't really a Sumedho." And he goes, "Boy, yeah, correct." He said, "There isn't a Sumedho. There isn't really an Anando. If you think there is, then there's trouble." So that the conditions of our lives play themselves out. We follow the pattern of these convenient fictions. I'm carrying on being Ajahn Amaro every day, because it's a convenient fiction. But if I think that's really that's an absolute reality, then dukkha arises. So, got time for one more, maybe from this side of the room. This has been. Any questions, doubts, unclarities? No? Anybody over here? Yes. Can you wait for the microphone to come?
Ajahn, as a grandmother, I see my children conditioning them, their children, my grandchildren, and it's very hard, really hard to see them like you are this and you're got to do this, and you know, it's hard, and I don't know where to draw the line when I come across that kind of things, and it's hard.
Well, I think you said it.
Yeah.
Birth is dukkha, jatipi dukkha, and that I mean, there's various different responses I can give. One is we are not the owners and controllers of each other. Neither our children nor our grandchildren nor our fellow monastics. That we don't own each other. We don't control. We're not the owner of this body or this mind. So we're certainly not the owners and controllers of others. So that's one aspect. Another is birth is dukkha. I was not joking. And in this lifetime, I haven't got any children, so biological children that I'm aware of, but that I'm aware of. But I have a lot of monastic children. The community here is about 40 monks and nuns, novices. But I can't control them, and I don't own them. And if you are say identifying with that sense of I want them to be this way, I don't want them to be that way. You can make your input as best you can, but what other people do with it is not within the range of our control. And so that part of what we can do is to reflect that, well, when you give birth, this is part of the package. And it often happens when someone is a parent and a new child comes along and says, "Oh, so happy! I've got my baby's arrived and my child." And I'm not being negative or kind of sour, but there's a lot that goes with the human life, and so that along with the sort of the natural sort of flush of joy that comes with a new baby, all the endorphins kind of that flood the system that make us kind of happy, and particularly help the parents to be patient and tolerant to looking after everything that's needed in caring for a baby. There's a lot that comes with a child, because even when they, as Ajahn Chah said, when they're small, just give them a banana and a handful of rice and they're happy. When they grow up, they want motorbikes. They have girlfriends and they want to go to college, and it gets really complicated. So we do the best we can, looking out for each other, caring for each other. But a human life has a huge potential for blessings and curses, difficulties, and that's the package. So when you choose to be a parent, or that's happened within your life, then you've chosen the whole package.
Yeah, I have.
So then, but that is a very useful reflection. Is that when I was choosing to have a child, or that came about in my life, because some people were sort of forced into marriages and told, you have to marry and you have to have children. They go, okay. They don't really want it, but they just sort of landed upon them by social obligation. They're in that role, and then with that, there comes that pain. So jatipi dukkha, birth is dukkha, not just for the child, but for the parent as well. That this is the natural result of being a parent. And and it's not just when children are small. It can be the first 20 years can be easy, and then when they get to be 20, 25, 30, then then the struggles really begin. It's like, my son wants to take over the family. He thinks he's in charge of everything. And when we were so happy with him growing up and doing well at school, we were all celebrating. Now he thinks he's the king of the world. What do we do with this? So again, I feel a bit of a fraud, because I haven't brought up any of my own children in this lifetime from early childhood, but I've certainly been around families a lot, and I've trained people in the monastic life. And if you have that reflection, well, this is part of the karma of being a mother, being a grandparent, being a grandmother, this is the package. This is what the Buddha was talking about. You get the whole package, and this is you can't just have the sweet bits without the bitter as well. So I signed up for this. Here it is. So then that gives a different framework for it. So just to be able to reflect, well, this is the suffering of motherhood. It feels this way. Then in that moment, the mind is not creating any kind of wrongness. It's saying this painfulness is part of the natural order, just as if you had a broken leg or you had a migraine or a toothache. It's like, well, I've got teeth. They're going to hurt sometimes. I've got the brain is going to have a headache sometimes. This is the way it is. So the dukkha that we create is the dukkha of the feeling it shouldn't be this way, or this is unfair, this is wrong, and then that is a dukkha that we can let go of. It doesn't mean that you approve of everything that your children are doing with your grandchildren. It doesn't mean that the sweet is bitter or the bitter is sweet. It can be bitter, but you do what you can, you make the input that you can, and then you let go. Because if we can see that this is part of nature, then people not doing things as you wish, you realize, well, that's part of nature. People have been bringing up their children badly for hundreds of thousands of years. That was not under our control. And so that, I'm not trying to make light of it, but if we see that the dukkha is that feeling of it shouldn't be this way, this is wrong, then even though it's painful, we can still work with it. If there is that it shouldn't be this way, that's the dukkha that clouds our vision and makes us make really foolish decisions and misread situations. If we're able to recognize, well, this is the painful result of having a human birth and having children, having grandchildren. This is the painful result of agreeing to be abbot of Amaravati. It's not quite the same, but similar in some respects. That you say, well, yeah, this is the cause, this is the effect. Duh. This is nature at work. There's going to be some sweet parts, some neutral parts, and some bitter parts. That's how nature is. Nothing has gone wrong. So like with sickness and aging and death, it's like when someone gets sick and dies, nothing has gone wrong. I mean, we do the best. There's probably a lot of doctors in the room. We do the best we can to take care of the system as well as we can, but ultimately it's not under our control, and every single one of these lives is going in one direction to its ending. So when somebody dies, nothing has gone wrong. It's just nature following its ordinary natural course. So when we reflect on it in that way, then there's the mind isn't adding that wrongness, that sense of things being out of order. That even if it's painful, the heart is attuned to the orderliness of the Dhamma, what they call Dhamma niyamata, the orderliness of nature, the orderliness of Dhamma. So then, it's even though we don't like it, like we don't like a toothache or a broken leg, here it is. We're not trying to make ourselves like the unlikable, but there we find that place in the heart where it's recognized. Well, yeah, this is how it works. Okay. So I think that's enough for this afternoon. So. And please, whatever's been useful of these reflections today, take them and use them. Whatever has not been useful, please leave them behind.